Alright, we're back. Now, first and foremost, you might wonder why I haven't been so active on this fine channel. And the reason is that I severely overestimated the amount of time I would have. So I've focused quite a bit on writing on my third book, which will hopefully be out later this year. And then, of course, attending to the usual business and the main channel and everything like that. So, yeah, I've been quite busy. But worry not. I will continue making videos for this channel. Hopefully they will be soothing and harmonious and comfy to listen to or to watch. Speaking of which, if you are watching the video, you might wonder what you're looking at. So I'm painting a High Elf model, an Ellyrian Reaver. We'll get back to why I like High Elves so much later on. But yes, this is for the game system Warhammer the Old World. And I have 10 of these fine models, and they will be fielded as 2 units of 5 each. And their tactical application is to be used as fast cavalry, so to flank the enemy units and harass war machines and stuff like that. So I will talk more about this maybe in a coming video, but that is the tactics of using them. So light cavalry to be used as such. So anyway, as you see in the title, my Warhammer origin story. How did I get into fantasy, Warhammer, and also science fiction, because the road is the same. And it all started when I was a sensitive young boy back in 2001. So many years ago. I've been an enjoyer of Lord of the Rings and Warhammer for longer than I have not. So I'm 36,000 years of age now, and I was 12 when my brother and I, we were walking in Stockholm, and then we saw that a new film was playing in the cinema, and it looked cool, so we decided to go and watch it, and the film was, of course, The Fellowship of the Ring. And ever since then, ever since we stepped into that cinema, I've been hooked on Lord of the Rings. So the first love in terms of fantasy, it was Lord of the Rings, and by this stage I had been, well, for as long as I remember, to be honest, I've had a great interest in history and myth, so fantasy, it was close enough, close at hand for me to get hooked. So yeah, this is how I got into fantasy. So starting with an interest in myth and history as a young child, my father read the Iliad and Odyssey to me and my brother when we were small, so I got that. My mother read some Nordic myths as well, and then history. Age of Empires 2 was also a big influence, and then later Age of Mythology as well. And then, of course, Age of Empires 3, which I occasionally play even to this day. Now, anyway, back to the story. Watching Lord of the Rings on the cinema then, it had a huge impact on me, and I'm very grateful for that because it served as a motivation ever since. So anyway, around this time, a few months later, I encountered Warhammer, and then I was, they aren't exactly the same. The classical Warhammer aesthetic is not exactly the same as Lord of the Rings, but you could see here are some cool elves, and here are some humans, and here are some dwarves, and here are some orcs. So it was similar enough for me to also get hooked on. So I started to paint a little bit then, and yeah, got some games in as well. We had a group of young lads back then in my school, and we played a little bit. Now, of course, when you're 12, it's a bit too young to play the game, because the game, it requires quite a bit of brain power, so to speak, to properly enjoy it. So I would say it's a game for, when you're above 20 years of age, something like that. But anyway, it was stimulating and nice to be immersed in that world nonetheless. So anyway, I began with a High Elf army, and then I also had a Bretonnian army. So I got into the Bretonnian army because they are sort of a mix between medieval France and the Arthurian legend. And there you have that sort of army. So I always liked that, the classical knights aesthetic. So High Elves, they were my entry point into Warhammer, but the Bretonnians, they were the first ones I had an army with. And I played a bit on and off with 2 friends at this time, and then fast forward until I'm 16 or so, starting gymnasiet, so high school, and then I noticed to my great joy that some of the other students, they had a gaming group. So we had actually a room in the school with, you know, terrain and gaming boards and everything like that. So the big boss of that group, it was a history teacher. So it was quite nice to play with him. Really nice guy. So he had an Empire army and I had a Bretonia army, and then we had some other students with different armies. So yeah, good stuff, good stuff. I still miss those days. So when sometimes I drive past the old school, and then I thought, yeah, it was good times playing some good old Warhammer here back in the day. So anyway, then I had a little bit of a break after high school up until a few years later as a student in Uppsala, and this is when I started my my journey in the Temple of Iron. So this is 2012 now, so a good few years have passed since the first encounter with the Fellowship of the Ring. So anyway, I decided to cut down to lose some weight so I could get in a nice shape for summer. And perhaps you can relate to what I'm saying now if you have ever, you know, embarked upon a cut to look shredded for summer. So anyway, I looked in the mirror every day. I was somewhat hungry every day, had cravings, and then I saw the mirror. It didn't really change all too much, and I looked every day, so I obsessed over the process instead of just trusting the process. So then I figured out, okay, I need to refocus my mind on something else so I don't go around all the day just thinking about food. So, you know, especially if you're training hard in the gym, your body screams for calories, but then you want to lose some fat, so therefore you can't eat all too much. So then I took up Warhammer painting again, to redirect my mind to think of something else. And this is something I've mentioned before. I believe I mentioned it in the first video on this channel as well, that a big strength of painting Warhammer is that you can intensely focus your mind on something else than if you have some, you know, annoying thoughts, such as in this case annoying thoughts of food, because I was hungry. So anyway, I started to paint a Warriors of Chaos army, because there were some guys in Uppsala playing Warhammer then as well. So I played quite a bit during these years, which was fun. So I could think of, you know, painting and games instead of how hungry I was. So I got in a good shape, as you probably all know. If you don't know, then you can look at some pictures of me in my golden youth. And now I'm sitting here, not in... Well, I'm in a decent shape now as I record this as well, but nowhere near the shape I was back in then, especially when it comes to, you know, how lean I was. Anyway, it helped greatly, so I got back into the hobby, got back into Warhammer then, thanks to that. So the gym brought me back to Warhammer. Now, to just clarify, we're talking about Warhammer Fantasy. So again, I had, ever since encountering Lord of the Rings, I'd been a fan of fantasy. Speaking of which, to go back in time a bit, so this is between the release of The Two Towers and The Return of the King. I also read the Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I read them in Swedish, and then last summer actually I read the Lord of the Rings in English. So yeah, good times, good times. Anyway, fast forward again to this time. I decided to give science fiction a go, because I had heard a lot of good things about a certain series which might be familiar to you, the Horus Heresy. So I picked up Horus Rising. This was in Science Fiction Bokhandeln, so the science fiction bookshop in Gamla Stan, Old Town, Stockholm. It's a nice place. You can check in there if you are in good old Stockholm. Anyway, I gave it a go, and so this was my first exposure to science fiction, by the way, and I was immediately hooked. I was hooked by the scale of it all. So a galaxy in flames, and then you have genetically engineered demigod brothers fighting over the entire universe. And then, of course, the God Emperor of mankind as well. So I started reading Horus Heresy, and over the coming years, I read all of them. I have read all of them. And I will make a video on the Horus Heresy as well, the reading order. I do have a reading order already up on thegoldenone.se if you want to check that out. So you don't need to read all of the books. You can read most of them, like 30 books or so. So quite a bit of a time investment to be sure. But it's worth it. It's worth reading the Horus Heresy. So this is Warhammer 40k, or rather 30k, because it's set 10,000 years before the current Warhammer 40,000 setting. So anyway, that is how I got into Warhammer 40,000 as well. So to conclude, I got into Warhammer 40,000 and the Horus Heresy via Warhammer Fantasy. So growing up, I was always more interested in the ancient world and the Middle Ages and that style of fighting. So, you know, with sword and shield and everything like that. And the gunpowder era, it wasn't as compelling for me. So that's also, it can explain why science fiction wasn't so interesting. And I will say also that I've never been a fan of science fiction. I've been specifically a fan of Warhammer 40,000. So if someone asks me if I like sci-fi, a bit, but that is mainly, again, because of Warhammer 40,000 and the Horus Heresy. Now then, all of that being said, I will comment a bit on the fine model you see before you. So up until this point, if you have been watching the video, perhaps you've only been listening to my story, but yeah, we have done some base coats. So filling in the metal mainly, because a lot of the model is metal, so the armor of this fine High Elf cavalryman. And now I am doing some highlights via dry brushing. So dry brushing essentially means that you have a little bit of paint on your brush and then you just touch all over to sort of catch the raised areas so that you get a nice highlight. Now moving on to this fine magenta color, sort of a dark magenta, and this is to bring some vibrant radiance to the model. So now we have, up until this point, we have sort of neutral colors with the white, brown and metal. So now this red, it sort of gives a pop to the model itself. So yeah, and of course when you have high elves, you do want to have them bright and colorful. That's at least how I envision a good high elf army to be, that style. And then if you have sort of chaos, so I mentioned earlier that I had a Warriors of Chaos army. I still do, by the way. I didn't sell that. I did sell my old Bretonnia and my old high elf armies, but I kept the Chaos Warriors. Anyway, those I painted in a bit more muted colors, so more fitting to their aesthetic, to have a bit darker colors. But here we have high elves, so they could be a bit brighter. So here I am painting in the flesh, the skin tone, and here are the arrows, so the fletching of the arrows in a nice contrast style paint there. So a nice beige color to make them look like geese feathers or something like that. So that is how the model looks at the moment before going on. So we're going to paint his hair in a nice blonde color, so a yellow contrast paint as well. So coloring in there, quite nice indeed, and then giving a wash to the face to get some definition, to get some shadows into the recesses of the face. And here we have a different red, so this is more of a burgundy and less of a magenta. They look similar enough, but you can still notice a difference. And this is the army color, so which I have on the other coming units of the army. So the magenta is specific to this unit type, so the Ellyrian Reavers, and this burgundy red, it will be a unifying color across the board, across all of the units in the High Elf army. So this is extremely stimulating, what I'm doing here as well, that you sort of frame in the metal with a nice red. So extremely stimulating to do, actually, when you do it. Alright, moving on with a special kind of technical paint. And now we are picking out the gemstones, and they're gonna be in jade, because I like jade, and also the green, it contrasts quite nicely with the rest of the model. And this is also, I have jade stones for all of the models in this army, or the coming models, I mean. Now moving on to adding some definition to the white of the model. So I spray painted it in white, so the starting point is white, and now I'm adding some gray in the recesses to give it some extra definition, so you can see the muscles of the horse a bit better. And now we're moving on to a highlight of the magenta cloth there. So I did use a shade in between as well that I didn't catch on camera, but here I'm ever so gently adding a highlight. And now we're moving on to highlighting the leather that we painted with a darker brown. Also used a shade there. So ever so cautiously just highlighting the edges there, and this makes a world of difference when we're looking at the end result when you do these fine highlights. So this takes a bit of practice, it takes a bit of stability on the hand, and I will say that painting whilst recording is a bit trickier, so that's why I cut out some sequences as well. And yeah, you can see my hair coming in the shot there as well. I did try my best, maybe I'll get better at it, but yeah, anyway, it requires a steady hand. And now we're doing another very stimulating part of the process, and that is to paint the base rims. And here is my standard color. I use it for all rims basically. And when you get to this stage, the model it's starting to be finished. So I usually use 2 or even 3 layers sometimes, so you get a nice smooth result. And I would say that it makes a very big difference as well if you have a smooth and nicely painted base rim. So the model is almost done, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little story time with me. I hope you enjoyed watching me paint a bit. I enjoyed making the video, and yeah, do let me know in the comment how you got into Warhammer, if you have been a fan, of course. And there we have the finished model. And yes, hopefully I will post some pictures or even some video sequences of coming Warhammer Old World battles with him and the other Ellyrian Reavers. So, thank you for watching. XOXO, boom!